So we are back at the Entomological Society of America conference with another entomologist. I love doing these Explain Yourself videos. So this is Olga Shishkov, and she is a PhD student at Georgia Tech. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So the way we sort of like to start this off is for you to give your elevator pitch, or like the 1-minute version of your current research project.
So before being an entomologist, I was an engineer.
Okay.
And my research is on black soldier fly larvae, everything from how to raise them to how they move in groups. Today I'm going to be presenting about how to raise black soldier fly larvae in an aerating bed. These larvae eat a lot, so their metabolism generates a bit of heat. And when these larvae are free on a compost pile, if they get too hot, they can crawl away and be happy. But startups like to raise them in plastic bins. And there's 10,000 larvae in one of these bins, so they can all easily overheat and die. So what I'm doing is I'm building an aerating bed that blows cool air through the larvae from underneath and cools them off, kind of like a personalized HVAC system for the larvae. And then we can raise at least 4 times as more larvae in the same space as would be possible without the air, because they're much happier living in a nice cool environment.
Me too. That's awesome. Okay, so you're making air conditioning for black soldier fly larvae. So why is it that people are, like, what are these things, and why are people trying to raise them, I guess, in a box inside, like a farm, right?
Should have started with that.
That's all right.
So these larvae are, well, first, they're really good at eating the food that we throw out. Something like 30% of the food that we make for ourselves is just left to rot in landfills.
Right.
And black soldier fly larvae are hungry little babies. They eat twice their body weight per day as they grow from a tiny little newly hatched larva that's smaller than a grain of rice to a big larva that's about the size of my pinky tip.
Wow.
So they're very hungry and they eat this stuff, and they're also very nutritious. Each larva is composed of something like 42% protein, 35% fat by dry weight. So chickens love eating them, fish love eating them. So the equation we end up with is food waste plus fly larvae equals chickens. And then people can eat the chickens.
Interesting. That's really cool. Okay, so they're actually, like, they're used in food waste processing then?
It's a process.
Okay.
They're working out the details.
Okay, that's really interesting. So it's like, so you're engineering this box for the fly larvae, but it's so that we can sort of fix these environmental problems and also make food.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. So I'm really interested in this whole, you started as an engineer, but now you're working on this air conditioning for bugs. So how did you wind up on this project?
So I got a bachelor's in engineering, and I thought, I hate engineering, so I'm going to go to grad school for engineering. Very logical process there.
Okay.
But I did a master's degree studying fluid mechanics, how fluid flows through a pipe, and I thought I wanted to keep doing that. I was applying to graduate programs, studying turbulence, airplanes, so on, how airplane wings work. And I interviewed in my current lab, where we use a lot of fluids techniques to understand how animals move. And I thought, this is the greatest thing that ever happened. It's engineering, which I kind of know how to do. It's physics, which is fun.
Sure.
And it's bugs. Like, what more could I want from life?
Of course, because bugs are the best. Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about how this thing works? Is it like a standalone unit? Does it have to be hooked up to stuff?
So it's basically a huge fan that blows air into a box, and then there's bins of bugs in the box. So basically, it's airproof, so the air just goes up through all of them. And what I'm working on now is actually making more and more layers of these boxes and seeing how many larvae can actually fit in this space.
Interesting. Okay, so it's sort of like a optimizing the bins of larvae per unit so that you're not using too much energy but producing the most. Interesting. That's very cool. Yeah, so why part of what we do here on this video series is talk about how people became scientists. So why did you decide to go to school for engineering, and why did you decide to pursue a graduate degree? I know you said you didn't like engineering, so you decided to go to grad school. But what was the whole process? What made you want to go to to get your bachelor's in science in the first place?
So when I was little, I really liked just seeing how things work, just taking apart stuff and, take apart a clock and then realize you don't know how to put it back together. And now it's broken and your mom yells at you because now she has a broken clock. And I really like just playing with bugs, playing in nature. My dad is a biologist, so he introduced me to a lot of biology, but I thought, well, I don't like biology, it has too many names. I can't memorize the names of things, so I'm gonna go be an engineer.
Okay.
But then still, I was really, even in engineering school, I was still much more interested in seeing how things work rather than making them work. So now a lot of my work is, aside from this aerating bed, figuring out how it is that these larvae pile up around food. I do some image analysis to see them crawling towards the food and falling away from the food, kind of recirculating. So I really like sort of the combination of everything that I do. I'm sorry, that was a very long-winded answer.
No, that's a great answer. So yeah, I'm interested in this too. So you're are you using regular video cameras? Are you using heat sensing cameras? How are you watching the movement, and why does it matter how they move?
So I use regular cameras.
Okay.
I think the coolest experiment that I've done so far was I took a fish tank, put a piece of food like an orange slice in the middle of it,
okay.
Because these larvae, they love orange slices. So I put it on a stick so they can't really push it around, and I film it from the top and from the bottom to see what they're doing, because we can't see what's going on inside this pile of larvae when they're all kind of eating.
Right.
And then I record this, and I use some image analysis software to see where they're going. And what happens is, as you'd expect on the floor, they're kind of all crawling towards it and trying to get to it. But what I didn't know was that on the top layer of the pile, it looks like a total mess, larvae going everywhere. But on average, 1 larva per second falls away from this orange slice and down the bottom of the pile. And this makes it sort of a recirculating fountain-like thing. Each larva eats for 5 minutes at a time and then stops. So then this allows larvae that are hungry to be able to push the larvae that are done out of the way so that they're not taking up all that space.
Wow.
And this is important because even though people have been looking at how animals move in groups for a very long time, nobody's really studied how animals feed in groups. And there's a lot of different things to look at there. First of all, how do you best feed fly larvae? But also you might think, well, people don't ever do this. People don't form piles and push each other around while they eat. But if you imagine a crowd at a Black Friday shopping mall, when they're all trying to grab that same flat screen TV, yes, they do.
That's such a great comparison. I love it.
We can use it to understand how to control crowds.
That's amazing.
And then also, I have some thoughts for swarm robotics. So if you think of a bunch of robots, imagine there's somebody buried under a pile of rubble after a building collapses. You don't want to send people in there, it's dangerous. Right. You send in robots that are going to dig this person out. So they're all crowd around this person. How do they best move the rocks off of this person in a group so that they can dig them out as quickly as possible? It's the same thing as a problem of collective feeding. So you might think that I'm only studying, maggots, but I'm really looking at all of these other potential directions in the future.
Interesting. So you started out with fluid dynamics engineering. Is this collective feeding movement also fluid dynamics in a way, or the behavior is similar?
It's an active fluid is what we call it.
That's super cool. I love it. This is sort of really interesting interdisciplinary research, right? You're using engineering and biology to answer questions that benefit a lot of different schools. That is really cool. I like it a lot.
I think it's cool too, so I'm glad you like it.
So what do you sort of want to do? So this is your dissertation project. So what do you want to do sort of post your PhD? Is this you want to continue working in labs on problems like this? Are you going to industry to build better tools for raising insects? Where do you see yourself going?
So in the near future, I'm hoping to start studying some other animals like bees, see how they move around as groups, how they respond to the environment around them, maybe get into some vertebrates. It's all up in the air a little bit. And then in the distant future, I'm also really into writing. So I want to do some more like communications things as I do research, maybe help out with journal editing. That would be a fun job to do, just like see all the exciting things that everybody else does and figure out, how to word it better and how to get it out to the public.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So that was future directions. But like I said, I also, we like to use these interviews to talk a little bit about everyone's backgrounds, because we're all diverse people and anyone can and should be a scientist if they want to. So you were telling me a little bit about it as we were walking over to find a place to sit, but what sorts of diverse categories that you might identify with, like us being women in science or some of the other things you shared with me. So what sort of identity categories like that do you think you fill? And then also, how has belonging to those identity categories sort of shaped your experience in science?
Well, I think the most obvious one for me is being a woman in engineering. I think as I went through my education, I didn't really realize, I don't think I realized like how much of an effect it had on the way that I perceived things and the way that I was perceived, because I go to something like an entomology conference now and I see a lot more women and I think this is how it should be. Why aren't we more like that in engineering?
Oh.
And then I go to some of the diversity panels here and I say, wow, things are not great for women, even here in entomology.
Yeah.
What did we get ourselves into? Also, I think as an immigrant, being born in Russia and growing up around a lot of Russians in the US, it's definitely a different experience. The Russians have a very strong attitude towards science. They, like my family is all scientists, and I was very encouraged to pursue this sort of thing. And I'm starting to realize that not everybody has had that. So while I've had a pretty weird experience, trying to understand like American academia, while everybody I know sort of talks about, this is how they have it in Russia. What is a PhD again? I realize that a lot of people don't even have that. So I'm really interested in like branching out and like exploring the like diversity work a little more, because it's very important to get all sorts of people involved in science.
Yeah, that's that's awesome. And yeah, so what was it like, I guess, growing up in a family where like everybody was a scientist, and like, yeah, how did that shape your decision? And you said your dad's a biologist, so yeah, how did you sort of take the experiences of your family members or the way they talked about science to help you decide what you were going to do?
I think for me, curiosity was really encouraged. My parents never yelled at me for playing in the dirt, which I think is great. I would dig up worms and like try to, get ants to fight, and my mom would say, "Oh, that's great,"
Yay!
And I'm also a huge dog nerd, so I spend a lot of time reading up on like different dog breeds and like how dogs behave, and what all the differences are. And I think little kids really like categories like that. So for me, that was kind of an important thing to realize that there's all these things that we know, but then there's also all these things that are like unknown. First you think, everybody knows, this is a golden retriever, this is a this is a that. But then I'm like, 12 reading on the internet, and I come across a golden doodle, and I'm like, that's nonsense. There's no such thing as a golden doodle. I know all the dog breeds. And I think that was kind of an important moment for me. I'm sorry, I went way off topic.
No, that's great. No, I love it.
I'm like really distracted.
That's okay. This is supposed to just be a nice conversation.
So yeah, golden doodles. Kind of moment that shaped my interest in science, when I realized that we don't actually know everything about everything, because there's these made-up dog breeds.
There are.
Yeah. And also like on the I guess on the like family side, I think my biggest like science advocate is my grandpa. He was an engineer, and whenever I publish something, he is very excited and gets. I just I think he's like my biggest fan.
That's amazing. I also have a grandpa who's my biggest fan. They're pretty great. Yeah. Has he, does he like read all of your papers and talk to you about them? Like, how does he engage with your science? And
Well, he's not like very good at English. They, like my grandparents, mostly speak Russian. But he, I've told him all about it, and the sort of communication, like trying to translate my science from English to Russian is always kind of weird. But it's always fun to talk to them about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. It's so interesting to talk to people with all of these different backgrounds. And speaking of interesting and different, even though this series is all about me talking to different scientists, we are not entirely defined by our science or our research, right? So is there anything about yourself, your personality, your hobbies, etc., that you think would be surprising to someone for them to learn about you if they only knew you as a scientist?
So when I started my PhD, I realized that I have to have hobbies, because when I was an undergrad, I didn't, and it was, even my work suffered because I was, just trying to work all the time, and that was extremely unhealthy.
Yeah.
So I do have hobbies. I do aerial silks, which is basically like curtains hanging from the air, and you climb up and you do cool tricks.
That's so cool.
So I started that like on a whim, first day in Atlanta. I'm like, well, I have nothing to do. None of my roommates are here yet. I'm gonna go try out this dance class. And I've stuck with that. And it's great. It's kind of a creative outlet for me. It's also good exercise.
Very, yeah.
I also take my dog to agility classes and enter her in trials.
Oh.
And my dog is just like me. She's
also an engineer?
No. First, she's scared of like everything.
Oh no.
She's a shelter dog, and she, I don't know what happened to her before I got her, but she's very, a little skittish. She's also really distractible. I'll be, telling her to jump, and she'll decide to sniff like in the direction of something totally different. But we've actually gotten our first qualifying score on Saturday.
Yay!
So if my scaredy little dog can do agility, I can probably do science, and that kind of makes me feel good about myself.
Absolutely, that's amazing. I'm so happy that you adopted a shelter dog. What kind of dog is she?
She's an Australian cattle dog mix. She's 2 years old, 45 pounds, white with orange spots.
Oh, adorable. And what made you decide to start doing agility between the two of you?
Just something I've always wanted to do. I spent a lot of time when I was little just watching the competitions on TV and thinking oh, I want to do that someday. So once I got a dog, I obviously had to.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's fun for both of you.
Yeah.
And I was so surprised and pleased to hear the thing about aerial silks. I know one other person who does that, but it's really, really cool. So do you have a setup in your house or apartment, or do you just do it at a studio?
There's a studio really close to where I live.
Very cool. Do you do performances, or is it just a thing you do for yourself?
The occasional student showcase. It's a really good distraction. I think a lot of grad students end up with really weird hobbies. And at first I thought it might be because we're all really stressed and we just need something weird. But then I thought maybe we're just intrinsically weird people who like to do weird things.
It's definitely that one.
So, yeah.
No, I think it's both. I think that you're right that it's no good to be trying to do this highly stressful, highly demanding job without having an outlet for something, like you said, creativity or just doing something physical instead of something mental. That's amazing. Yeah. Is there anything else that you want people to know about you or your science, or anything you would say to a younger you?
I gotta think about this one for a second. I think in terms of advice for younger scientists, younger versions of me, first, your grades don't define you. It's no use being stressed out about not getting that A or even that C when there's just so much more to you, both as a person and as a scientist, than just your numbers on a paper. There might be, a different reason why you're not getting those good grades, and there's other exciting things that you can do that have nothing to do with it. And the more important thing is, are you excited about what you're doing? Are you excited about your work? And if you're not excited about your work, what can you do to make it more exciting for yourself? And just don't worry about like the results. Worry about the process and the things that you're passionate about, and the results will come or not. It doesn't really matter then.
That's amazing advice. I'm so glad you said that. I think that's really important. You're right, that doing something that's inherently interesting to you is more important, and like you said, the pursuit of doing the thing is more important than the letter grade. So that was amazing. Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us. Your engineering interdisciplinary project is a little different than anything we've had on this series before, so I was really glad to get the chance to speak with you.
Oh yeah, and also like don't be afraid of doing weird stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely, go off in the crazy directions, whatever you can imagine. People will tell you you're crazy, but you will find people who will look at you and say, you know what, that's a wonderful idea, and that is very validating.
You just have to find those people.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Thank you. We'll thank Olga again for coming to speak to us. And if you liked this video, don't forget to like it. If you didn't like this video, please share it with someone who would. And if you'd like to support the Roving Naturalist, remember to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon. Then go check out my Patreon page. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.